Good afternoon, everyone. It is, I've lost count, week 10, week 11, week 12 of whatever it was of STRI Live. Let's call it a lockdown webinar party. And like any good party, the guest I've got this one is the last guest to leave the party. Can't get rid of him. He's back again. Christian, welcome back. And we started, well, I think you started it and we've sort of been running it together, different weeks, etc. So this is the season finale. Season 2 will be back in the autumn, subject to terms and conditions. But welcome back, Chris.
Thank you very much, Paul. Glad to be back for the last episode, and big shout out to everyone that's watching, that's joining the stream, and that's been following us through this journey, this series of lockdown webinars. It's been fascinating to see the topics and how they evolved, and the questions and the interactivity. So it's been a bit of a pleasure to be a part of it, really.
Good stuff. And you know, we're building this up to this sort of finale, this final episode. I hope it goes off with a bang. What have we got groundbreaking, or a season 2? Are we going to sort of it'll be like Dallas recreated again, and hopefully not with you coming out the shower and it's all a dream though, Chris?
Well, absolutely. Who shot JR? No, thank you very much. So hopefully we can leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger. But there's been an awful lot to talk about in such a short period of time over these past sort of 2.5 months, really. There's been a huge amount of stuff just going on in everyone's life, and the life of a turf manager has been somewhat unconventional, to say the least. So I suspect there's a lot of stuff to get through, and now, of course, we're all focused and looking forward to what the future brings, what it's holding now, the battling of the elements and the desire of golfers to be playing golf after so long not being able to play. So the challenges are different, but the overall challenge and the sort of the technical challenge is by no means diminished by the fact that we're easing out of lockdown. Very much it's now back into the swing of the challenges that the environment, the weather, the usage and pressure brings to the situation. So there are some pretty unique challenges still to come.
AKA get your hose pipe out.
Absolutely. I mean, I've just been crunching the numbers actually, and since the middle of March here in Bingley at the trial facility, we've only had 20 mil of rain in 2.5 months. Only 5 mils of rain throughout the whole of May. So, as you can imagine, water management, how to get the best out of water when it does land, maintaining plant health has been a real challenge. We've now got a little bit of rain, but it's only 4 or 5 mils, so we've equalled May's record already, one 24-hour block. But water and its management and how to maintain plant health is still going to be one of our biggest challenges over the next few months.
Okay. Well, look, just as well as welcoming yourself, I'd like to welcome sort of people that will join in today, our regular viewers, listeners. And I did promise a loyalty reward for anybody who's got the stamps, the appropriate number of stamps. So, and that reward would be some rain. So if you've only received 1 millimeter of rain today, it's because you haven't dialed into all 10 of these live ones. So if you had, it would have been a sort of nice steady deluge, etc., which you're all sort of praying for. But get your questions in to us. So I'm sure we'll have some regular faces pop up. Hi, Nico. Good to have you back again. Hope you're all well down there. So right, I'm going to kick this off with a let's discuss whether it's UK's favourite topic outside of COVID. So I'm going to throw these at you, Chris. Now, get yourself ready for this, because this is groundbreaking. This is a headlines of UK climate projections 2018. So did you know that by the end of the 21st century, all areas of the UK are projected to be warmer, seasonally more so in the summer rather than the winter? There you go. That's free today. That information.
Yeah.
Hot summers are expected to become more common. The ground takes researchers to find this out. The summer of 2018 was the equal warmest summer for the UK, along with 2006, 2003, and 1976. Two more headlines here. Climate change has already increased the chance of seeing a summer as hot as 2018 by 12 to 25%. That's a big needle mover.
Absolutely.
Lastly, there is a warning that the future warming for more common hot summers increases to near 50% by the end of the 21st century.
Absolutely. Makes you stop and think.
Yeah, so it's water. It's dealing with too much of it and not enough of it, and right now we are dealing with not enough of it. How's it been on the trials grounds?
Yeah, it's been very dry and it's been a challenge. So this year, I think so when you look at climate change modelling, very much what we've got right now is what we can expect a lot more of. So quite big swings, quite strong swings, quite sort of years of middling weather where it's kind of temperate and wet and temperate and dry. They're gone. I think we're going to be, through climate change and climate change modelling, and with the other seasonal changes that go on, so El Niño, and the other cycles that go on globally overlaid on top of that, we're going to end up with bigger, brasher, more extremes of weather, and I think that's what we're seeing now. I mean, it seems like looking back through weather records, and that's the advantage of weather records, you can actually see the memory is hazy, and can be foggy, but when you look at the data, actually we can see, when you look at that trend from say 2000 going onwards, you can look at how springs, for example, have fared, and more and more often, more recently, we're seeing challenging springs at a time when you are hoping for, expecting growth to be able to do renovation work, overseeding work, preparing for the sort of heavy foot traffic for the season ahead. And more often, we're finding those springs aren't living up to expectation, and for whatever reason, either dry or cold, or dry and warm, and we don't really have much of a spring, and that's causing problems. But this is very much down to how climate change is going to affect us. But we can't guarantee that's always going to be the way. There will be changes and shifts, so that it will break that or change away, and we've got to be flexible in our plans to adapt to that. So climate change, sort of in that both short, medium, and long term, is one, and still remains to be, one of the biggest challenges we've got to overcome and face, because the effects we see here and now, they're here, overlaying with normal weather patterns or weather patterns that go on, and other global cycles. So it is a long-term trend and change that we're looking at, and we are seeing the fruits of that change and that trend at the moment. So that causes challenges. I mean, Paul, we're seeing a lot of turf that we're having to make decisions about whether it gets watered or not, sort of looking outside of greens and tees, for example, or football pitches. I mean, what's the story you're seeing out there on golf courses as you're going out and about on visits?
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to sort of travel to different corners of more recently, sort of England and Wales, and boy, was it dry up North Wales, which I really wasn't expecting. But in the southeast, normally, they've sort of been up against these pressures in a way. I'm going to say this, and this is going to sound quite perverse, and I don't mind this. Don't mean this in any shape or form, in terms, because everybody's going to listen to this and say, "What the hell are you talking about?" I'm actually quite glad this is happening right now. This is putting the pressure right back on the turf. It is loading things onto staff, onto greenkeeping units, turf managers who maybe they've got staff on furlough. So it is a problem. I understand that, but you're going to ask me, why do I think this is a good thing? It's because it's keeping what needs to be done on the agenda. If we had now, fairways, for instance, and after the heat stress of 2018, there was significant damage done, and fairways had such a soft ride of it for so many years, and it's not a problem. Fairways, it's a good surface to play off. It looks okay. It's grass. Some are better than others, but it's grass. And then 2018 comes, bang, and you lose a lot of junk, and it damaged a lot of fine grasses, the heat as well. So now a lot of clubs reinvested then, did renovations, overseeding, etc., and not only look to get recovery, but look to just improve, not recovery, make themselves more tolerant, because who knows when the next big drought event comes along, and hey, here we are, 18 months down the line, here we are. Now, courses that thought, right, okay, look, it'll recover. And it did recover. It got 9 months wet conditions, and it recovered because opportunistic. Rye was the first to bounce back, but Poa came in. Now, what I have seen this spring, Chris, is that the Poa, which is still relatively juvenile, that's gone. That's totaled already. The finer grasses, the resilient ones that and certainly the ones overseeding, they're bouncing back, and a little bit of rain, so the next day or two, might help them along a little bit. We haven't had the heat yet of 2018. No. But I think it just refocuses the mind over what needs to be done. Like the wet winter, as problematic as that was, it reminded people, all those discussions where we were saying drainage, right? Yeah, okay, we do need to be getting on with this. And I sort of feared that if we just left things and then they recovered, and then clubs sort of soon forget, and it just doesn't get actioned, and then bang, you've got the problem again. So it's not great right now, but it is keeping things on the agenda, and maybe now is the time to try and push forward and improve. Finances are going to be tough, I understand, but at least the discussion can be there.
I think you're right. I think there's nothing like looking back and trying to be a bit objective about it, and a bit of critical thinking, but it's easy sometimes to get lost in the moment. And I know anyone that manages or is responsible for turf, it's always a temptation to focus on the here and now, and perhaps what's just coming around the corner, because that's the problem on your desk for that day, and it has been managing lack of moisture. But I think when you sort of harking back to climate change and the extremely wet conditions we've had over winter, when you look at precipitation models under climate change scenarios, actually we find the total precipitation is similar or more in a 12-month period. It's just when it comes and how it comes. Yeah. And so if we look back now to that period, say from August, September, October, November, December, when things were darn wet, and now we look to May and very dry, and people are starting to think, ooh, abstraction licenses, do I have enough water in my ponds? We could have been harvesting, trapping that water, taking the opportunity while it was there. That's got to be a massive thought process for medium and long-term resiliency. Yeah. In all forms of turf management, because we have to face the fact that we're going to get caught out on the hop more often, I guess, and we need to build that resiliency in.
I've got, just this week alone, so we've got 2 projects which are kicked off looking at sort of water resourcing. And I know this is going to be a theme for, whilst this sort of season finale of these live webinars, there are going to be some which are going to be recorded, looking very much at water management, I believe. Chris, I don't know, what news have you got on that for us?
Yeah, so sort of looking beyond just this lockdown webinar series, we're doing in partnership with Polypipe a series of videos, and they'll all be on STRI's YouTube channel, which really is focusing on all aspects of water management in sport and landscape management, because it echoes back to what we've just been talking about. We must build resiliency. We must build strength in our systems, in our sport surfaces, in our facilities. And it's looking at how we do that, and how we do that in a way which is going to be effective, both from actually capturing, harvesting, reusing, being efficient with water, but also cost effective, because finances, let's face it, global recession is here, and the finances into the future are going to be a challenge for every facility. And so how do we meet this technical challenge and this sort of logistics finance challenge? And so as part of this series of videos are going to tackle these issues, tackle in quite broad terms as well as quite focused technical terms. And I think that's going to be sort of enlightening for guys and gals out there to sort of help, maybe not give them the solution to their exact problem on their facility, but give them an idea, a little seed, a little germ that they can start to grow and act upon. So all of that is upcoming, and they're being produced at the moment and will start to be released shortly out there into the wild. So that should be interesting.
Yeah. And the key is these sustainable ones. So these projects which are kicked off with, now looking, because it's brought it right back to the agenda. Like, hey, look, heck, we've got it again now. How are we going to find a sustainable water supply? It's not just as simple as thinking, look, we've got a borehole, or we'll sink another one, because that water resource might not be there in 10 years' time. Very much the sort of a lot of work we're doing with the Golf Course 2030 projects. So we might have to think about innovative ways of being able to get planning permission to secure these things. I know that's something that James Pedestra at STRI is sort of working with clients on, is, just don't necessarily think of that's the solution on the shelf right now today. What's going to be the best for moving forward as well. With the thought of, Carl sends in here, 2018 drought was a final straw and resulted in a new irrigation system, or a new irritation system installed in 2019. I hope it isn't an irritation, Carl. And it's great, because I'm sure, Carl, when that went in and then it didn't stop raining, people would be saying, "What on earth have we invested the money in this for?" But I'm sure, and I'm hoping it's working well now, and saving you guys a lot of time in being able to place more accurate water, because that's what we've got to be responsible with it as well. Eric, darling, sorry I'm late. Eric, I've lost a bet because I said you'd be the first one to say hello today. So thanks for that. I'll chase you down for that at a later date, Eric. But good to see you. So look, I mean, where are we with the we spoke then just about Golf Course 2030 projects, and those have been progressing. I know the sort of integrated turf management one. Let's start with that at the moment, because we're not seeing much disease out there, but boy, have we seen some leather jackets this spring. I know we've discussed it. Glenn Kirby was on earlier, and we had some good news this week about a Celebrin being signed off for Schaefer, but we're still waiting on leather jackets. So let's hope. But look, the damage I've seen this spring across many regions, I guess, Chris, fueled by wet, warm conditions.
Yeah, and I think kind of one of the things that's going to be shown up in May in particular is the potential effect of high populations of leather jackets with existing other abiotic stresses. So I mean, I went to a site and we were doing a study looking at leather jackets, and actually the turf was quite healthy where it had been able to be irrigated, but unirrigated areas, the leather jackets were there. And I mean, it was amazing. We can't underestimate how resilient these organisms are. I mean, literally you couldn't put a spade in the ground. It was that rock hard and dry. If you pulled out earthworms, they were wrapped up in a tight ball, kind of going, I'm waiting till the rain comes. But the leather jackets were there. They were still eating the roots. The plant was stressed. But where we had the leather jackets without the irrigation, the turf was already stressed with that root herbivory was just too much. Where we could reduce the stress through irrigation, then the turf was healthier. And I think if you've got biblical levels of leather jackets, then you're in for a real sort of storm of trouble. And
wasn't the season finale I was looking for there, Chris?
No, well, it's a challenge that we all have in terms of how we can deal with leather jackets, and that's why I think with leather jackets it is a combined combined arms approach. It is looking at true ITM. It's looking at what controls we have available to us on a chemical front, a pesticide front, but it's also looking at alternative solutions and management cultural practice on how we can actually challenge the leather jackets. And so, for example, the selective use of covers on greens and teas can be helpful, physical removal, but obviously there is time constraints to that, and when you've already got pressures of staffing, that can be a challenge. But
yeah, but it is something I think we have to consider moving forward as maybe as a support. Whilst we've got, we're talking integrated turf management, aren't we? So cultural management is always going to form part and parcel. It should form part and parcel of it. The chemicals should be your integrated, but still part of that process. Or do you maybe your last resort? But the sort of, I think, we've nailed down a little bit more this spring because we had the opportunity for sheets to be down longer. Whereas normally they went out in an evening and then they're up the next day. And would I be right in saying we've got to sort of get them out of that sort of day-night cycle?
Yeah, and
it's a little beasts.
Yeah, what you've got to do is you've got to try and trick them to come up and during the day when they think it's night and it's humid, it's moist, they're doing their thing and ultimately can then be physically removed. And so it's all about creating the right conditions and tricking them. And I think those tools, look, if you've got really bad affected areas, and I think the thing with leather jackets are you can get locally high populations build up quite easily just because of the flight distance of a female crane fly, which means you get high populations build up over time. I mean, it's using the crows and the other animals to point you because they're not digging around where there's no beasties. So other areas of the golf course look at this selectively, but of course everyone's focus is on greens and tees and perhaps areas where we've got approaches, surrounds where we've got a bad infestation. But I think you can be effective. You can get good levels of removal. Once you've physically removed it, it's not like it's laying eggs. It's just the larvae. So that's one less bug that's going to be eating roots, and one less bug that may then be coming up and sort of feeding off the grass at the surface as well. So I think that approach can be very successful, but again, you've got to make sure that you are optimizing it. So for example, making sure that you are able to create that moist, dark atmosphere, because that's what tricks them thinking it's night, but really it's first thing in the morning, whipping the covers off and off they come. So I think it is time to think more creatively. I think with a lot of problems challenges we face, the silver bullet just doesn't exist anymore. And we're going to have to sort of bite that bullet and say, look, it's going to be the hard road for us, and ITM is the hard road, but it is the road that will ultimately get us there successfully. And it's not something you will win overnight. It is a continual battle time, and I think that's continual progress is what you're looking for.
Okay, Eric, just going back into the sort of our previous discussion there about irrigation efficiency improvements need to be achieved. They do, and again, what am I saying this spring? Irrigation systems they're never 100% uniform. Even then we get the wind, but aging irrigation systems and sprinklers wear. And sprinklers get replaced. They might get replaced with a slightly different model, and it might change the pressure at the sprinkler point. Your pumping efficiency over time might change, etc. So the system's probably, on a 20-year-old system, it's probably not working as efficiently as it was. And I've had a couple of discussions with, I think we need to, you probably need to audit this, not catch-can tests, etc. But get somebody who knows a way around a system, not just replace a sprinkler, etc., but just really thinking systematically, because I'm seeing increased time, increased money, increased loss of performance, where these variances are coming in and creating problems, creating drought stress issues, which is lingering into the autumn, creating microdochium situations. coming in, and we're seeing moss coming in on frequently droughted.
Yep.
And we're seeing varying issues with wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. So you're absolutely right, Eric. That these things need to be achieved.
Absolutely, and I think those guys, for example, that have been able to get on and maintain a good surfactant wetting agent program, for example, will be maximising any irrigation inputs they're putting on, because it's just getting into the soil easier. And likewise, when we get natural rainfall, we're making the most of it when it does come. So it's all of these bits in that jigsaw we need to get in the right place at the right time to make sure that we can be as effective and as efficient as possible. And I think, I guess an irrigation system is no different to a car. At some point, it becomes an old banger. And what do you have to do with an old banger? It's time to scrap it and think about a new investment.
I think the problem is with the irrigation systems, a car like a machine, like a mower, you can see when it's it's past its, you can see it's smoking, you can hear it's struggling, etc., because the irrigation system's underground. And other than connecting a hose pipe or seeing the sprinklers early in the morning, the members will rarely see it. But it's your biggest capital investment. It will not last forever. Certainly the old PVC pipe systems. And Chris, how many, you've been to courses, how many pump houses have you seen which have doubled up as fertilizer stores? And
absolutely,
it's if the members really knew what was going on in these things, they would say, yeah, Mr. Head Greenkeeper Course Manager, you are right, really. Let's do something about it.
It's just sometimes difficult. It's difficult to get the message across, and it's sometimes a very difficult pill to swallow, isn't it? Because it is a large, chunky cost. But what happens is, in a wet year, everyone's happy with the situation, and when it turns to a dry year or a dry period, that's when the proverbial hits the fan, and we all wish we'd done something different or got ahead and done that bit of work, and it's just a challenge. But irrigation systems are always a good talking point, I guess, on visits, and sort of that talk of upgrades or reinvestment into a new irrigation or improvements to irrigation system are probably quite difficult ones to have.
Okay, let's go back to leather jackets where we were. So again, Eric, you're keeping us busy here, so you're sort of getting your payback on me now for making me lose my bet. Right. So, is there any research into radical ideas? That's what you do best, Chris. Is radical. Grass species with a bad taste.
Mm-hmm.
Seismic ground vibrations. I did wonder about this year with the lack of play and whether that was an issue. I think it's just wet morning conditions personally, but electrical charge through the ground. You Eric, you've been watching what's the old Bill Murray film, isn't it? Caddyshack. Yes, I've been watching too much Caddyshack, Eric. But yeah, I saying now I've seen it for some other rodents. So right, okay, well, let's bounce these ideas around. What do you reckon?
Well, I think certainly there is technologies out there. Symbiotic endophytes, for example, grasses which have endophytic organisms which are symbiotic with them, have been looked at in a number of countries, which make that particular grass unpalatable to a variety of things. It could be grazing animals, it could be insect pests. So those kind of technologies do exist, but of course it's then down to sort of national restrictions, things like that, and these things take time to come through. But there are technologies being looked at which are using, if you like, unpalatable, trying to make grasses unpalatable. I think the electric shock treatment, has been used for example, earthworm removal. There are folk that use, not necessarily at an industrial scale, but a local scale, electrodes in the ground to get the earthworms out of the ground for harvesting for fishing, for example. But the problem is trying to do that safely in the wild with, and it's not necessarily high voltage, it's high current power sources, and how that sort of transmits through the soil. But the health and safety on that is always a little bit challenging, and the surface area you can actually treat. But there is a chance that certainly putting any electrical charge through the soil is going to discourage invertebrates and more than likely to bring them to the surface. The seismic, sort of the vibrations one, is an interesting one, because I've not come across anything which has talked about leather jackets, for example, being particularly susceptible to sort of tapping on the ground and popping out the surface, unlike earthworms. So, but is there something that, for example, at a certain frequency will help disrupt membranes in leather jackets but not other invertebrates? Again, these are all things that could be looked at to perhaps sort of try and find other weapons in our cultural arsenal.
Yeah, okay. And Nico says he's seen electricity used on a small scale for earthworms in a backyard.
Yeah, those technologies do exist, and it's just trying to do things in a safe way on a large scale area and cost effectively. But I think Eric, you're right. There is real value sometimes in just going a bit off piste with thinking and just see what might come up, because again, in combination with a number of approaches, you could actually get some benefit. I mean, one of the things that might be interesting is this period of drought may well have a secondary effect. If we get an early onset of leather jacket activity, cranefly activity from, say, like the Paludosea oleracea, which tends to hatch in springtime, if mummy cranefly can't lay eggs in the ground easily, then you would expect there to be fewer offspring. So there may be some other sort of aspects that we can look at with these unique conditions to see, do we see a benefit going into, not right now, but into future seasons.
Yeah, okay. Question from Martin here. Hi Martin, I hope you're keeping okay. So he says, hi chaps. Following on from Eric's question regarding leather jackets, do you have any ideas on what would deter the crane fly from laying in our surfaces and reducing levels of controls required? So moisture levels, repellents. Your organic matter comes to mind there, Chris, in terms of, if we've got an environment that's conducive to harbouring these pests and pathogens.
And absolutely. And so I think, for example, undoubtedly, there will be, and someone's probably done this as a SAD PhD study. I'm with a SAD PhD myself, looking at earthworms, so I can attest how sad these things can get. Someone's probably done a study somewhere looking at the penetrative force of a ovipositor of a cranefly female, and I would, from first principle, think that if you could maintain that surface hard and dry and tight and consolidated, they can't lay their eggs in the ground, which means the eggs will either desiccate and die. And it also means at the time, and I think another thing is at the time of hatching, it's making sure that we don't have any uncovered tine holes, because the amount of times you do look, and even with what you think are healed over tine holes, but it's just that little toupee you get of turf, and when you pull it back, there's sort of tine hole, and at that right point in the season, you look at the bottom of it, you take a little sample out, and there's a cranefly larvae in there. Don't create ready-made homes, because
yeah. I think, yeah, we've looked at this and discussed this with quite a few people in terms of, would you go to like a slip tine instead of opening the surface up? But then you see, there's areas of fairway you haven't done anything, and suddenly there's a biblical plague in there. So I think, if the populations are going to be there, and you say that flying distance of the female,
yeah,
they're going to find somewhere, aren't they?
And you'd be surprised at how far they can burrow. I mean, we've been, whilst harvesting and sampling for leather jackets at a bone hard site, you'll be surprised at the size of the holes that they're building for themselves and how quickly they can move within the soil. So I think trying to repel them or trying to prevent them from laying eggs is a good strategy, but it's certainly not going to give you full control. It may well help to reduce that over a period of successive seasons, reduce that population to where it is there, but not causing turf health issues and therefore playability issues.
Like all unwanted pests, when the going gets tough, they head for a bunker.
Absolutely, absolutely. They'll bug out, pardon the pun, and go somewhere else.
Message from Alan here. So getting back to irrigation, I suppose it's great because the first 3 months of the year we were wondering when we could all do our drainage projects, and now we're talking about irrigation systems and how we need to use them and maintain them. This is water management, dealing with too much of it or not enough, but it's the discussions with clubs again. It's supporting the course managers who, clubs are saying, how on earth are we afford to do this? And how, the drainage, how on earth are we going to afford to do the irrigation system? The worst situations is where they never get around to doing either. And at some point in time, it's going to need to be done. Courses are 100 years old. A lot of them will be 200 years old. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of them might not be there to see 102 years old. But those who are strong, now is the time to sort of really progress, and the stronger are going to be better. We've seen an upturn in golf inquiries. People sort of now seeing the benefits of joining a golf club. So maybe clubs will use this as a sort of a button to say, right, okay, now is the time to move forward.
Innovative thinking, I think, could really help these businesses, golf clubs. Thinking about memberships and getting people involved with golf when there's a desire there could be the saviour. So I think those clubs which are flexible, open, and sort of prepared to think a little differently about these things could really reap the rewards and help ensure their financial survival. So I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Whilst we sort of do this finale and sort of wrap up of the sort of things that have been discussed in this sort of lockdown webinar party, probably the right time to ask how the Syngenta trial, lockdown, the essential maintenance trial is going. I know there's been a fresh release on sort of week 7 of that on the YouTube today, but how are you seeing that progress, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating to be involved with that trial, and I think it's been all about trying to engage with the community out there managing turf during these unusual times, restrictions in place, limitations in place of what we can do, and actually kind of give that feedback in real time as we can get it. And it has been fascinating. It's been fascinating to look at what you can get away with, and how little mowing you can do when the grass isn't growing, or when you can control growth, and actually some of the benefits you can have, but then how difficult it can be to flip it back on. It's not just a turning the switch. But one of the things the things that have come out of that trial for me have been very much, it's been all about trying to put the control back in the hands of greenkeepers, course managers, turf managers in general. So being able to be in control of growth, how even your growth, how consistent your growth is through use of PGRs. They do what they say on the tin, and they're very effective at it. And I think that has been a useful tool in these times, but also at any time when we talk about, when we want to look at how we can be in control of growth, and sort of that balance between nitrogen and nutrients on one hand and growth regulators on the other, and how to get the best out of them. But I think the other thing as well was a demonstration involuntarily, because we didn't quite know it was going to be this dry for this long, of the benefit of a monthly preventative wetting agent program. Because what that's meant is, even just with one heavy watering application, deep watering application per week, through to pretty dry weeks, with surfactant going in, has helped maintain that at optimal soil moisture content through that period. So what we've done is we've taken some of that stress away from the plant. And I think that's been sort of, in combination with the plant growth regulator, has been really important and fascinating, just to see how far you can step back and let the turf do its thing. Albeit we haven't had to contend with play and biomass production placement. But it's been fascinating, and I think that trial's still got another week to go. And it's now switched from that very much essential maintenance mode into how quickly we can get this back to a good playability, good playing quality to the surface, because that's what members want. We've got those more and more people wanting to go and play golf. Tee times going to be fully booked for months on end. So how can we get more people around, and how can we make that surface robust and resilient? On the flip side, it's interesting to look at, if this goes on a little longer, about the benefits of PGRs, for example, with stress management, stress tolerance as well. So there's been a number of key learnings that have come out with that, out of that trial, to sort of help that day-to-day feedback.
I'm looking forward and catching up and actually sort of seeing that trial out on site. And as I say, the sort of take-home message from the week 7 video that was posted today was that one irrigation application, how that sort of kept the moisture content where you want it there. So it was very interesting. And the other thing for me, sort of out of this, is again, the typical rule of thumb would have been start a PGR application maybe beginning of May, but this started much earlier, and and unless I'm mistaken, I don't think there's been a negative from that.
No, and with very little nitrogen going in. Certainly, there was a base feed program that went on, because the grass was telling us it needed a feed in sort of April. But there's been no nutrient going in with the PGRs. We've been using the PGRs tank mixed with wetting agent, with Libra, because we were following essential maintenance guidance and trying to just do one spray per week to do all of those different things. And traditionally you would say, well, wouldn't we put PGR with a wetting agent, because how's it going to work? But we're seeing efficacy, we're seeing plant in regulation. So it has been fascinating. It's been fascinating challenge of preconceptions about these things and how early. And for me, it's been one of the first times we've been able to look at, in a trials context, sort of GDD, and what GDD can do and how it can work. And I mean, certainly we're seeing absolutely using Syngenta's GDD tool, which is in development at the moment. It's been really useful to track daily GDD integrals and how quickly they build up, and how we've switched from working on a 50 GDD cycle, how that went from 2 weeks, almost within the space of a week, to a weekly application of Primo, just because growth demanded it.
Yeah, and I say obviously that part of that trial have been looking at sort of clip yields as well, and for everybody who knows me, I'm sort of big into that. I think there's a great sort of learning that can be done from that, and not just at high ends, courses where there's sort of fewer staff as well. John at Warsaw, I don't know if you're listening, John, but some of the stuff that you put out recently, really interesting stuff, and you can only learn from it, and get a much better understanding of growth and how you're sort of feeding programs, etc. And a sort of a programmed approach is quite good, but it's always going to be driven by moisture and temperature, and those are the points outside of your control. Looking forward to sort of the that trial wrapping up there, and
there's a lot to digest from it.
Absolutely, so we've got just under 10 minutes left. So anybody who's got a question, now's your time to throw in the sort of the bombshell question where we can sort of go out in a blaze of glory or fail miserably. Just get them in. I'm seeing Chris. I'm seeing people certainly, again, with the water management, people sort of clubs looking at, okay, what funding opportunities are out there to sort of help us support. And there are potentially, I think, again, one of the past webinars, I think Sophie and James had spoken about things, and please, anybody sort of contact us, and we'll see. We might be able to sort of steer in the right direction for some of these things. And as from tomorrow, STRI will launch a project Pathfinder, which is a part of the UK government's 20 million emergency COVID-19 innovation strategy. So that's looking to support clients, sports facilities affected by this crisis, with a stage 1 consultation. And that's as I say, that's fully funded, supported. So we can sort of help clients understand a roadmap, how facility business plans are going to sort of manage now and the longer term financial sustainability. So there'll be some information going out tomorrow about that, and just a few of these projects in different industries, but we're very pleased to be part of this one. So that could be looking at, this support can be looking at planning applications, turf grass maintenance practices with reduced staff, potential cost savings, longer term options, just all, redevelopment and land sales, things like that. Because again, I'm seeing that conversation crop up more and more in places looking at, okay, we've got pockets of land here, we're looking at sort of a real long-term business shift in diversification. So watch this space.
I mean, that kind of initiative could only be beneficial to sports facilities around the country, and I think that's a great initiative to help people look at ways to help themselves, which is what it's all about.
So I've got a couple of questions here, so I'm going to save a real juicy one for a moment. Let's start with not belittling yours here, so Carl, but what's your thoughts on sports returning behind closed doors? And are the Villa going down, Paul? Right, okay, of course they're not. They're going to win the next game, and then I think the season should be closed because they'll be out the relegation zone. I think, but sports behind doors, I don't know. It did as if anybody sort of tuned in, and there's been a couple of demonstration matches with in golf with Rory and Tiger was playing, and Phil Mickelson and a few others. So yeah, I don't know, the Ryder Cup without spectators. Ooh, and horse racing, we've seen equestrian come back this week, and I don't know, is it just the new normal, Chris? I don't know what your sporting ambitions are.
Yeah, I think the amount of people you have conversations with, and the lack of sport, which give a kind of a structure to a lot of people's lives, in terms of either going out playing it, or going and watching it, or sitting down and watching it on TV, if you like, being a couch potato. But having that removed kind of does leave quite a large hollow gap in, and quite a lot of conversation. The water cooler conversation, albeit at a 2 metre distance, is now onto other things rather than sport. And I think sport coming back, as long as it's done sensibly and with the safety of players and everyone else involved in mind, then it can only be a good thing to help make people feel there is a sense of normality. Things will return to normal. There's a psychological element to it as well. And it does trigger those kind of conversations. So I think as long as it's done sensibly, there is I'm all for that, and I think there's going to be more and more sports going back behind closed doors, because ultimately sport is also a business, and as we know, not to be too downbeat about it, but with COVID-19 globally, there is going to be financial problems for a while with us on a global scale, and we need to try and get back to some semblance of normality and sort of business running again. So I think this is a good step to getting towards that start. Okay,
so this is a good one from Nico. One thing that wasn't mentioned for the leather jacket control was a biological nematode route. Could you give some feedback on this? So go on in, Chris.
Well, I think, as with all things, and biological controls in general, really, it's all about getting bug A to bug B in the right concentration at the right time to actually have a pathogenic effect. And we know undoubtedly the nematode products and the nematodes species within those products are effective at controlling or killing or parasitizing the leather jackets and chafers. Obviously, the smaller, the younger, the better, because their systems are less able to tolerate it. The bigger, the fatter, the juicier, the more individual nematodes it's going to take to knock that bad boy down. But so undoubtedly they work when you look at them in that sort of broad context where you're looking at how many nematodes it takes to parasitize. The problem comes, as with all biological controls, generally speaking, when we're trying to do biological control out in an existing ecosystem, biocontrols, where they're most successful, is in glass houses. Why? Well, glass houses, you control the environment. It's a nice encapsulated space. You can make sure conditions are right. But you put bugs out there into a wider ecosystem, there are factors outside of your control. So where people, from what I'm talking to, sort of the greenkeepers, course managers, where people have the most success is where they've been able to get everything right, with from application timing to the age of the grubs, and it's even getting that nematode washed down into the soil profile where the leather jackets are. And if you miss it, they're too shallow or too deep, then they've missed the target. They're not seek and kill. They've got to be washed down into the soil, because the nematode will have motility. It can move around to some extent, but it can't crawl for huge distances to find the bugs to parasitize. So it's all about getting applications right, and the right timings, the right irrigation afterwards, soil conditions, optimal moisture, optimal temperature. With all biological controls, and it's not just nematodes, there's a lot to get right for it to have optimal efficacy. When it all does go right, we've seen situations where you can have good control. But where you don't, for whatever reason, dry, wet, can't get it into the soil very easily, that's where we tend to see situations of, so say, less control than would be desirable.
I've seen the same with fungicide applications in last autumn and winter. And again, we can take this sort of theoretical approach, which we know works. We know the products work. We know the sequences, etc. And getting your timing right, absolutely critical to it. But again, at a practical level, and quite rightly, the course manager turned around to me and said, "Paul, but when was I going to apply it? I couldn't get the spray even on the green."
Yeah.
So we do. It's not just about the sort of the theory might be there. It's a practical approach of getting it in when things are absolutely saturated or bone dry. And ultimately, if we wait for the perfect day, the perfect day may never come. So integrated is turf management is the word. We're going to make this the very last question for season 1. And Eric, I think you've probably got the most loyalty stamps, so quite right, it should be from yourself as well. So your guest last week talked about measuring clip yield. Micah Woods is talking about minimal nutrients. That's the MLSN. What's is going to be a new method on measuring growth versus plant health to find these minimums, and how could clubs be able to carry out this measurement in-house daily? So that's a good one to end on.
It is, and a little bit of crystal ball gazing as to what those kind of technologies could be, or just, let's speak no bones about it. What Mike is talking about, and what we've all been talking about in the clipping yield measurement, they're not rocket science. They're pretty fundamental to the biology of a grass plant. It's just how we actually roll them, integrate them into a program and our understanding, and how do we actually read the results of that? And I think that's always, the interpretation is always important as doing testing. What does that actually mean? But I think using and rolling out those measurements, getting everyone familiar with those measurements, what does that actually mean for me on my golf course with my greens, which are creeping bend, POA dominant, fescue dominant? The answer will be different for different people based on your course, based on your soil type, your natural growth patterns and regimes. But I think looking even further into the future, I think it's looking at automated or predictive systems whereby we're trying to predict what the likely growth potential is going to be from forecasts, from trajectories, looking at change, and looking at sort of, if you like, plant growth response. So it might be, for example, using remote sensing technologies like NDVI, the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or other reflectance-based technologies, which essentially are telling us how green is our grass, coupled with, for example, putting load load cells or potentiometers onto clipping boxes so that we can measure the yields automatically from greens, things like that.
I absolutely. If you so it is technology solutions. If you look at crop harvesting now, these absolutely fantastic machines, which are sort of almost, well, a lot of them are self-driven now, GPS controlled, and they're measuring the volume of yield going through the system. And as soon as it starts to drop off, it's adjusting its settings. But not only that, it's signaling the information hub in Germany or something, which is then reporting back. It is telling you exactly what the yield is, etc. So I see mowing companies are going to play a part in this development as well. I mean, just technology for
yeah, so sorry, Paul. Just imagine your triple mowers that are talking the GPS reference. They know how big the greens are because you've got it all marked out in the software, and literally each individual clipping box is being weighed and tared each time you go onto a new green. So every green, every time you mow, you know how much clippings have been taken off per square meter, and that's all fed into. You've got an NDVI meter attached to your mower. It's taking readings of greenness. I think as with all these systems, it's how that data is presented and interpreted. But I think this is the technological stuff that can come. We're just a little bit behind agriculture because that's where the main market force and driving force are. But undoubtedly, these kind of technologies will come to us, undoubtedly.
Yeah, I think we're seeing it coming along. I mean, some of the stuff that we're doing with turf sync, is starting to look at that. Certainly, the sensor technology and stuff like that. But the sort of the final comment here is the trust and experience of the course manager, because there are no I's in technology.
Yeah.
So, boom. The art of greenkeeping and the experience of the guys out there, practical application of everything, and that's what makes a success of any sport surface.
Absolutely, and I think you've hit it right there. Is that everything we've talked about? The technology is a tool. It is an assist. Ultimately, what makes that decision? It's what's there. It's what's between your ears. It's using your own senses along with all the different information streams together to ultimately make that decision-making process. And all we're doing is trying to give senses and of things we can't sense, we can't see, is difficult to comprehend, and making that visible or understandable and using that in the decision-making process. And I think that's what good tech should be. Sometimes it's trying to get to that point, which is the challenge, ultimately. But I think that's where we're heading to, and I think that's very important. Is that for me, and I've always said this, sort of modern or new greenkeeping or groundsmanship in the future is always going to be about good, solid, knowledge-based greenkeeping or groundsmanship. But it's that interface and that melding of technology, techniques, sensing, and all the rest of it that helps just elevate it to the next level of understanding. And we'll continue to grow that way. So that you cannot take the greenkeeper out of grass management.
Very good. So Eric, you left us with a good one there, and thanks very much for your final comments on that. And enjoyed having you on the series as well. Look, with like all good season finales, we've had an extended edition here, 15 minutes over time. With that, behalf of Chris, myself, everybody at STRI, let's hope you enjoy the season. Stay safe, stay well. We'll see you on the other side in the autumn. Keep an eye out on STRI Facebook and YouTube, etc. Up the Villa, get that one in for all our USA viewers as well. Go Broncos, go Broncos, go Buccaneers. Mrs. Brady and Gronkowski. We'll see how they do this year. That's all from me.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to catching up with everybody at some point in the near future.
Cheers.